Hey everyone, how's it going? Luke from A Taste of AZ. On today's episode, we've got Josh Hebert, the owner of Hot Noodles and Cold Sake in Scottsdale, Arizona. Their ramen is absolutely to die for. Make sure to like the video below and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Let's jump into it.
So we have Josh Hebert from...
I'm from Scottsdale. I moved here when
Arizona,
I was 3. I consider myself a native. So
Okay.
My extended family's all from Michigan, but I don't remember being born or any of that stuff. You know, most of us don't. If you do, like, more power to you, I guess. But
Yeah.
I'm pretty much de facto native. So
Gotcha. Where did you, so you grew up in Scottsdale, you said?
I grew up in Scottsdale, yeah, back when it looked like Queen Creek, when there was nothing there. But I grew up basically like 96th Street and Cactus. So
Okay.
in the early 80s, you know, when there was a horse ranch every 6 blocks, and that was about it. So there were 4 houses in our neighborhood. The rest were built over the next 5 years. That's, you know, basically like Queen Creek looks. So.
Yeah. That's crazy, man. It's crazy to think it because it wasn't that long ago, right? I saw a trivia thing. It was like 1999. Like, what was the population of Phoenix? It was like 975,000, right? And now it's like 4.5 million. Right? I don't know if it counted metro, whatever it counted. This place has grown, and you've seen it grow, right? I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, totally. The shopping center that the ramen shop is in right now, this shopping center didn't exist until like 2000. You know,
Yeah.
I grew up a mile and a half from here, but it was not existent. You know, the first in this whole, I mean, this is a giant shopping center. It's like 1 million square feet. The place that Oso is in right now, the distillery, that little wing was the first wing built, in the same little wing where Four Peaks is, was the second one built. And that wing, when this place first opened, was Cafe Boa's 3rd restaurant. They tried to build a super fancy restaurant in North Scottsdale, and it was just like 5 years too early. But I remember that to this day. You know, it was kind of like they tried to do this $2.5 million super high-end version of Boa, and it didn't really work out. If it had been 5 years later, no problem, because Kierland came into effect, and all of a sudden you had like the massive uprising of high end in this neighborhood. But you know, it's kind of like how Gilbert is back then. It was just like, it was a lot more younger families. So even if it was, you know, middle class, upper middle class people, your cost of living is still high because you're raising kids. So
Sure.
it just is what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously Scottsdale changed as the demographics changed, and Gilbert's going to be there someday too, because, you know, kids move out of the house hopefully after 18, 19, 25 years, depending on. So,
yeah.
You know.
My wife and I both made the rule. We're like 18, they graduate, they're out. Like, later, you can
Right.
you can stay with us a couple weeks in the summer, you know, for, you know, school break, but you're out, man. You know?
Start working at 16 so you could save up for the apartment down payment.
Exactly. And you'll be glad you did, right? I mean,
Right.
That Luke, you know, that's how Luke
Absolutely.
was, you know, and I'm glad.
I was trying to get out as soon as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Financial independence at a young age is a pretty cool thing. Like, even if you're not being irresponsible, it's just nice to not have to ask your parents for money, and not, because, you know, it's a great lesson to learn early on.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's a perfect thing to transition into food as well, right? Into being a chef. Did you come from a family that was food a centerpiece of your family?
Not completely. I had a grandmother my dad was one of 10 kids. And so my maternal grandmother would have like pretty big Christmases and stuff. There tend to be a lot of cousins and aunts and uncles. I mean, I have 29 cousins just from that side of the family.
Wow.
And so Christmases could be anywhere from like 30 or 40 people sometimes. And it was pretty fascinating. Grandma wasn't like super gourmet cook. I'm not going to tell the story of like Chez Panisse and Alice Waters, where, you know, she was like hand peeling garlic, and we had these huge Italian spreads, but it was just like a lot of really delicious food. And even my mother, who wasn't any kind of a fancy cook, she did cook a lot of fresh food at the house. And I just grew up liking food. As a family, when we went on vacations, we always went to a musical or opera or something like that. We always had a nice dinner beforehand, went to a fancy restaurant, had to get dressed up. And that was kind of the first real inspiration, was being around that environment and liking it. You know, I liked dressing fancy. I liked having the waiters, you know, dress fancy and like talk to you really nice. And it just seemed like a cool place. But what really started me cooking was I kind of enjoyed it as a relaxation thing when I was in high school, like, probably 8th grade even, and
Okay.
just kind of decided it would be a cool way to get women, which is a true story. Uh,
Did it work? Has it
it
worked?
did.
Yeah.
And I got really good at it after a little while. And my mother was a Catholic school teacher and my dad was a lawyer. And so I just kind of assumed I'd go to college, like go to Notre Dame and major in finance and be a stockbroker or something like that. But by the time I got to be a sophomore, I was getting a lot of compliments from people and I was cooking out of some more difficult cookbooks. And so I just kind of, instead of poo-pooing the idea, I kind of said, well, this is fun and I enjoy it. Why not try to make a career out of it? So I started cooking my junior year in high school at just a corporate chain Italian restaurant because it was the first place that would give me a job and it was right down the street. And kind of like halfway through my senior year was when Tarbells opened. And I always wanted to do fine dining. And I basically kind of begged my way for a job there when they were taking applications. And I did a couple interviews, and I remember when Chef hired me, he called me and said, I never imagined I'd be hiring a 17-year-old kid to work in a kitchen, but we want to give it a shot. And so,
Yeah.
that was almost, I did almost 6.5 years the first time I worked there. So.
Wow. That's crazy, man. Well, what got you? I know you said you like dressing fancy and you like that environment. What about the cooking side of it? What about the preparation of that food drew you in, right? Because sometimes there's a difference between the ambiance of something and the actual execution of it, right?
Sure.
So when it came to the food, what kept you engaged in that?
The challenge of doing things at a higher level was always kind of unique to me. I always wanted to get into the fine dining because of the refinement of it, because of the creativity behind it. And, as a kid, you don't understand for a little while, you're not going to be lent any creativity. You just kind of have to, be the grunt doing the day-to-day work, which is totally fine. What kind of made it cool for me was when I did that corporate chain Italian restaurant before I got into the fine dining, it seemed like a sport. I grew up playing baseball, and it just seemed the energy, the team camaraderie, working on the line, getting along with people seemed like a team sport. And it was a ton of fun. There wasn't anything about it I didn't like. The first day, we had this process, the station where I was working, where I had to take sheet trays of bread, put them in the oven, and then cut them up and serve them for the free bread appetizer. I was working the appetizer station, whatever it was. And somebody had put already hot sheet trays of bread on there, and I grabbed them with my bare hands, burned my fingers. It was like first or second day. And one of the older guys in the kitchen leaned over and looked at me and said, rule number 1, hot and cold metal both look the same, don't they? And so I still teach people that when they're new or when I teach cooking classes to this day, touch something lightly the first time because it's the easy way to burn yourself. Hot and cold metal both look the same. So
yeah, that was was that at Tarbells?
That was at the corporate Italian restaurant.
Oh, okay, yeah, you did.
Probably my second day in a kitchen period.
But it didn't turn you off from it. It didn't. You're like you like the pain a little bit, right?
Badge of courage.
Yeah. So how do you, as a 17-year-old, get in at Tarbells? Because I'm sure there are a bunch of people that applied for that job, and how did it become you to be the one that was chosen to do that, to work with him?
I think they were fascinated by the idea that it was something I really, really wanted to do. This is, we're talking 1994, and this is pretty much pre-Food Network, where everybody wanted to be the next Emeril Lagasse. I just wanted to learn how to cook great food, and it wasn't really a sexy job back then. And I think they were kind of infatuated with the idea that this kid actually wanted to work there and learn about cooking instead of just doing a job. Yeah. And they knew they had a project on their hands, but I think it was just the guy who was the executive chef at the time, his name was Mark Bloom. And I think he even said to me once toward the end of his time there, he's like, I figured we'd just kind of chew you up and spit you out, but I like the idea that you had no bad habits and that we could teach you great from the beginning, And he even said too, he's like, we like the idea that you spent almost a year in kind of a corporate restaurant because if anything, you guys know how to clean really well, which was great. So
yeah,
absolutely.
And what was it like then once you're in Tarbells, right? Because you were there, did you open the place or had they just opened?
I didn't open it, but I think it had been open for about 4 months at the time.
Okay. So brand new spot then.
Brand new spot, yeah. I mean, yeah. I remember, I'd have to, I think about it. I remember how the menu kind of evolved from being a little more Houston's like to a lot more higher end over the first couple of years. And I know it was based on the feedback that they got from the customers. And, the food just kept getting better and better. The ingredients kept getting better and better. And it was kind of fun to see that. The evolution of it was pretty unique. And the evolution of it over the years has been pretty unique. So I think that restaurant right now is doing the best food it's ever done. So
I've never been there. I'm ashamed to say. My wife used to work down. Maybe she's never been to Tarbells. So he has Tarbells is on 40th and Camelback. Is that right?
32nd Camelback.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. So my wife works down that way. And she's like, you got to go. I'm like, I know. My list is like 1,000 places right now. So I'm just chipping away at it.
Bigger because there's so many places you can't go. Like we're just regressing.
Yeah. Yep.
Not knocking any of those off these days.
Yeah. Well, so you worked for Mark Tarbell. How long did you work? How long were you with Tarbell?
The first time it was like 6 years.
Okay.
A little bit. Yep. I moved to San Francisco at the end of '99, and ended up working in San Francisco for it's like 4 years, 3.5 years, right around there.
Okay.
And then moved to Tokyo for about a year and a half. So.
Wow. All based on food, like all influenced by like your growth as a chef?
Yeah, the restaurant where I was working in San Francisco, the last place I worked for about a year and a half, the owner signed a deal to do a version of our restaurant in a major hotel, and he asked me if I wanted to go be the guy to stay there. I did that, and it was amazing. So a pretty over the top, not just work experience working internationally and especially in a culture that's so different than ours,
sure.
But also just being in a country that's completely food obsessed. And the food is just very different from the ingredients to the simplicity and everything. And that's it was super inspiring to be there. In living in San Francisco, I worked a lot, but I also went out to eat a lot. We just, that's one of the things you do when you cook to learn is not just work at the restaurant where you work, but go see what everybody else is doing. And in Japan, it was just so different and so just awe-inspiring. You can go out to eat it in America and you can look at a dish and you can kind of dissect it in your head. You go out to eat in Japan and you're just like, the hell is this? I don't even know where this vegetable comes from.
Yeah,
I knows how to use it, so it was pretty interesting.
How did that influence you from coming from the fine dining in? Is it the same in Japan as far as like the fine dining? Obviously there's differences, but were you just going to the fine dining places or were you going kind of full spectrum?
Full spectrum. Everything nice. There from the yakitori, they just do everything perfectly. They don't really eat bad food there. And so it's kind of nice to go to a place where, the dollar a skewer yakitori joint from a quality standpoint is as good as the $300, Jiro Dreams of Sushi kind of place. So it's their infatuation with it across the board is pretty amazing. Yeah, there's fast food there, and yeah, there's McDonald's there, and there's noodle shops and ramen joints and stuff are like kind of their version of fast food. And there's crappy ones as well as like really good ones, but there's not a lot of crappy things there, period. You can kind of like walk around and run into generally pretty good. If you just walked like this and all of a sudden chose which door to go into, you're not going to find a lot of disappointment,
Yeah. Well, do I hear a hint of a possible Josh Hebert concept in Japan one of these days?
That wouldn't be bad. I would definitely go back and work for my old boss in Japan, but he's in Vermont now, so I won't be going to work for him. But if something came up in Japan, I would happily do it. But I think Ivan Ramen's got the Americanized, the gaijin version of ramen covered in Tokyo right now, so we'll have to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it could be a little while before this Rona thing is over. So
yeah,
we'll on the back burner.
Can't really plan anything at this point, right? Like it's like, right. I don't know if like, that sounds great. Yeah. You guys will come over next month. Nope. Sorry. Maybe a month after,
When you wake up in the morning and at some point you just stop trying to make plans. There's no point.
Yeah.
Wake up and see what the world throws at you today.
Yeah, exactly. So where did things go from you, you being, work basically, helping somebody else execute their dream to now you're like, you get to a point where like, hey, now it's my turn to open up my own. Where did that transition happen?
That transition happened. I moved back from Japan in 2000, at the end of 2003, because my little sister was in a car accident and wasn't sure if I was going to move back to Japan or move back to San Francisco. but my family needed some extra hands on the ground. And I had been here not working, but just helping family for about 3 or 4 months. And when I finally decided I was going to stay here permanently, I started just going to visit people that I knew who were in town, who were, had jobs, owners and other chefs and stuff. And of course started with Tarbells, and I, went into Tarbells and just kind of said, hey, if you hear of anything in town that's decent, give me a holler. And 40 minutes later, his general manager called me and was like, hey, want to come back tomorrow? And so we had a little chat, and they were looking for a chef for Tarbells. So I went back and worked there as executive chef for another year. So, it's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, well, that's a good transition back in.
What's that?
I would say that had to be a good transition back into the Arizona food scene,
yeah.
Right? Something you're familiar with, something that that was kind of the place you're brought up, right?
Yeah, it was for an executive chef job. It was a little easier to slide in because I knew the food already, and the leadership skills. That was the first time my leadership skills were really tested, and so I was young. I was 27, and it took a little time, but I did it for a year. And then eventually moved on and was the chef at North at Kierland for a year. So I got my Fox RC time in. Okay. And that was when Fox RC was only 3 restaurants. So it was a good time. That's the busiest restaurant I've ever been the chef of. To
North?
$9 million a year restaurant. It's crazy.
Yeah. Wow.
But it was awesome.
You said
I had good
in
Kierland?
Kierland?
Yeah, Kierland.
Okay. That's a great spot. It's a cool little spot. It's like that little, yeah,
that's the most efficient kitchen in the world. It has to be.
Because it's so small.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the one. And that's the one that the bathrooms you go outside to go to the bathrooms, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. That place is tight. It's a really cool, intimate spot, but I couldn't even imagine what that kitchen's like. Tight, right?
It's minuscule. It has to be so organized. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
That was probably the meanest I ever was as a chef. You just have to be like completely under control. You can't have waiters walking in and out of the kitchen. You can't have bartenders, you walk into the walk-in and some bartender's like slamming a can of like pineapple juice. And it's just like, get the fuck out of here. Like you can't. I mean, people in restaurants, like people sneak like a quick snack break, chug a water, chug a Coke, whatever it is. And it's just like, you have to get out of here, not here.
Yeah.
It's here, but here. Okay. Move. So
you had to be a hard ass at that point, right? And
oh yeah.
Yeah.
The kitchen was fine. The kitchen was like, it was a bunch of really cool people. They were all hard workers and they listened really well and everyone was solid. The service staff, because of the kind of place it was, is different, especially after a long time of working in super high-end fine dining. I'm now back working with college kids as waiters and younger people as waiters. And it's just like, look, I'm a pro. You don't get in my way, I'm not going to get in yours. But
yeah. That is a different.
People thought I wasn't the nicest guy in the world.
Hey, man, I don't know. I think more people need to be yelled at these days. So, keep it up, Josh.
Don't disagree.
So what is it about so when people are waiting, that brought up a good question for me is fine dining waiters is that a career? Like, is that a path that, because like you said, you work at most other restaurants, it's a side gig in most cases, right? Or, something getting you through college. Are fine dining waiters, is that a path?
Yes, that is.
Yeah.
Fine dining
Okay.
waiters is a career.
Okay.
Most of the people who do that, have 15 to 30 years experience and have, intimate wine knowledge and incredible touch with people and incredible observation skills. A fine dining waiter is a thing of beauty, and a great waiter is something. I had a waiter who worked at Posh, who worked all 9 years Posh was open for me. He started with me when he was 54 years old. He had worked for 20 years in San Francisco as a fine dining waiter and worked there until the day I closed the doors. And he eventually retired a fine dining waiter. But I have never met a more skilled human being than this man. He could read every table. He could communicate to management effectively. I mean, every bit of being a true professional. He was the guy who cleaned up after staff meal, even if no one asked him to. He was the first waiter I ever saw when he was taking empty bottles of wine to the recycling bin. Instead of throwing them in the bin, laying them down gently so they don't make extra noise. because it's you want a quiet environment,
Yeah.
Every detail he had covered. And it's probably because he had been yelled at for every detail for 20 years, but
Sure.
impeccable. And I still have a server who also worked at Posh for a good deal of time, who, when I do private chef stuff in people's homes, I take her with me, and she's just a pleasure, and everyone loves her, and just a total professional. So
Now, when you say really good at reading the tables, like what is that? What are they looking for? Like whether or not people are enjoying it or they're not, like, what do you look for?
well, whether or not people are enjoying it is one. Some people will stand up and tell you when they're unhappy, and some people will just kind of wait and tell you online with a 2-star Yelp a few days later.
Yeah.
But that's part of it, being able to check in with people. Obviously if a fair amount of food remains uneaten, it's time to ask if there was a problem with it or if something was wrong. But really think about when you go out to any restaurant, high end or medium end or low end, when you have a typical waiter, sometimes they're really chatty and sit at your table, and sometimes they're not, right? A great waiter can really read whether or not you want someone who's more attentive or less attentive.
Okay.
A great waiter can know right away whether to bother you or just check if you need something. Some people, a lot of times tourists, people who are coming from other places, they want to chat up the waiters and learn a little bit more about other restaurants, where they like, what they would suggest, what stuff to do in town. Some people, especially people who are dining for business, want you to take their order, make sure their water and wine is always, and leave them. And so that becomes a pretty important part of that becomes second nature to a lot of people. And that's one of the things that makes an incredibly talented waiter,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I think if anything, then when above all else with fine dining, it's experience, right? I mean, we try, like Luke and I always talk about, like, that's what we want to capture with Arizona Food and Beverage, is the experience part of it, right?
Right.
And you always want to have a good experience, but it seems like with fine dining, that's even more fine tuned, right? With the server who knows exactly how to, not just some dude. It's like, fuck, man, I'm hungover. What do you want? Like, dude, I don't care. Buffalo wrap, whatever, So that just takes that's a whole nother level of experience, right? Is that what it's about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
You can take inexperienced people and train them, but the eye for detail takes years and years and years of experience. The most finite things come into play in fine dining, from, uniforms to the way the table is set, to how you bring things to a table, to how you present sales of things. You can upsell things in an unaggressive way, very simply. There's some things that, when somebody's right for the restaurant, somebody's not. Like, fine dining is one of the few places where it's not for everybody. We're not asking everyone to come to my restaurant in the fancy restaurant world. If it's not your thing, please don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've had I had a really funny Yelp at Posh once when someone said, food's amazing, service is amazing, cool spot, great decor, but I hate this kind of shit, 2 stars. And it's like, I mean, I thought that was actually a really well-written Yelp, because the guy basically said, I hate being at places like this, but you know what? It's a great place if you're into it. And it's,
yeah.
So I don't really mind, that kind of thing is, it's your place. I got a complaint voicemail one day from someone who went into this great detail about how great it was, and she and her husband do this for their anniversary every year, and they always try a fancy new restaurant, and there were no problems, but it was just a little expensive for them, and they probably couldn't afford it. It was a big mistake, and if I wouldn't mind refunding their money because she couldn't afford it, that would be great. And I was just like, nope.
No.
I'm not going to complain about the price of a Ferrari if I can't afford it, because they're not asking me to buy a Ferrari. They're asking someone who can afford it to buy a Ferrari.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. Like, the price is right there on the menu. And in your mind, yes, you have to add 15, 18, 20% plus another 7.95% for sales tax. And when you're going out to Chili's and spending $20, that's insignificant. When you're spending $200 a person, you need to factor that in.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's fine. Like, I'm not trying to sound like an elitist snob by any such sense of the imagination. That's just life. If you complain about tipping, don't go out to eat. There's plenty of stuff at your house.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
I mean, if you get bad service, by all means, there's never any benefit if you feel like you've had bad service, to just straight up stiffing your waiter, because 90% of the waiters in the world are just going to be like, oh, they're cheap. Whereas, maybe in fine dining occasionally, but as an owner, you look and you say, I don't learn anything if you just stiff the waiter. But if you had a bad experience, you stiff the waiter and then you tell me on the way out why, then hopefully I can fix that next time,
Yeah. Yeah. But come with the solution. That's what I've always said is like, don't complain unless you have a solution. Right. Yeah. Which still try not to complain anyways, but
Right.
at the very least have a suggestion or not, whatever. But that's funny. Like I loved it all, but I overshot my budget. Can you please give me my money back?
Right.
That was honesty though. Like that was very honest.
Yeah. And you know what? Sometimes being too honest is probably not the right idea. I mean, I'm glad they didn't lie and say that it was horrible and they wanted their money back, because I probably was obligated to do it. But in that circumstance where you were that honest and like, well, we just ended up not being able to afford this. It was too much money and we'd like a refund. Like, well, good try.
Yeah. I'm going to try that, Josh. I'm just going to let you know that somewhere. I don't know where, but
I'll post pictures of you in my next fancy restaurant just so that we know.
Yeah. Look out for this guy. I'll grow my hair back out and, yeah. So Posh, tell me like the concept of Posh, and I was not able to make it there before you guys closed in 2017? Was it 2017 it was open till?
2017, yeah.
Just the idea of it, just the concept of it just really intrigues me. So what was Posh the first place you opened, like your own spot?
It was the first place that was mine, yeah.
Okay.
I had a few investors, mostly people from within a close-knit community and people who had been fans of mine over the years. One of my investors was an ex-girlfriend's dad. I had a few family members. I matched everybody's investment myself. I had saved a bunch of money. So and I tell young people all the time, because I was 32 when I opened Posh. At that point, I was, 16, 17 years into my career. But I get a lot of young people who see that and they're like, how did you open a restaurant so early? And I said, the easiest way to get investors is if you want $50,000 from 10 people, you better have $50,000 of your own money. If you've got nothing to put on the table, that's a lot more risk for them. But if you're risking the same amount they are, and
that's a good point.
Obviously you have to deal with more affluent people to get money for something like a restaurant. But, even if you're only asking people for $25,000 or $50,000 and someone might be worth $50 million, $25,000 is still a lot of money. And I've heard younger people and, people coming up asking me saying like, oh, well, they've got plenty of money, they should just give it to me. I'm like, $25,000 or $50,000 is still a lot of fucking money, no matter how much money you have. So you should expect nothing for free like that. They expect results when it happens, regardless. Nobody's going to give you a $50,000 favor, That's like a nice Mercedes.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, people will, you're not going to, you have to bring value yourself, right? Otherwise, like, hey, can I have all this money so I can open a spot? Right. Well, what happens if it crashes? Well, I don't know.
A lot of times when you hear stories in the local community and in the national community of like some chef-owned restaurant where the chef like loses their job or gets fired, it's usually because the chef doesn't have an actual ownership stake in the restaurant. They've got investors without contributing money themselves. And in those situations, you can get fired. It's not actually your restaurant.
That's what's intriguing. Like when you see, the more we get into, understanding breweries and understanding restaurants, you always look at it as like, oh shit, that's Mark Tarbell. That's Mark Tarbell's restaurant. You don't know who has investors. You don't know, there's a team of people that are behind it. And that's what you need sometimes. And in a way it's kind of, for me, it was a little bit inspirational of like, okay, all right. Like it's all the weight doesn't have to be on one person's shoulder. If a few people can carry this, so how long had you been building the concept of Posh before you opened?
It kind of came from this idea of like one of my biggest pet peeves with fine dining restaurants that do tasting menus is at the bottom of all the tasting menus, it always says, must be ordered by entire table, no substitutions, please. And so if I'm with three of my friends and somebody doesn't like goat cheese and there's goat cheese on the tasting menu, that means we can't have the tasting menu. And so the idea was, how do we create something like that where that's not an issue? Where, I was already, after working at Tarbells, we were already working in a highly accommodative customer service environment anyway, and we would happily make substitutions and changes for people. And so I kind of grew up with that as just a foundation. And I'm glad I did, because that's part of hospitality. And so I was playing with this idea of doing a tasting menu only restaurant and being slightly customizable. And I wanted to have some way to get people's dislikes. We didn't want to do likes, because likes sent the wrong message. If you say, well, I really like ahi tuna, but I don't have ahi tuna that day, I'm going to let you down, right? And so we're kind of going with the process of having reasonable expectations. And one of them is, well, I love caviar. And like, well, I didn't get caviar. Well, yeah, because I don't have it today. It's a small restaurant. I can't have, a $50,000 inventory at any given time. And so we kind of came with this idea of, it's easier if you tell us what you don't like. And then in order to kind of accumulate that information in what was essentially a 54-seat restaurant, we needed some kind of an efficient system to do it. And I kept going back to the one piece of paper that people are familiar with in a restaurant, and that's the sushi bar menu, right? You get the little checklist and you kind of write in what you want. And so we kind of came up with a bastardized version of the sushi bar menu to fill our needs, so we could gather information pretty quickly. And bless you. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Hey,
That's a good one.
I feel better now. It seemed like it was a good one.
Yeah, I was fighting that one off, trying to not let it go, but I couldn't hold it back any longer.
It's all good. It sounded like it felt good. So, so at the top of this thing, you could choose how many courses you wanted, from 4 to 7. And then there was another option that was called the full tasting, which was like 14 courses, depending upon the day. And then at the below, there were a list available, and you would cross off anything you didn't want. And then below that, there was space to give me any other general dislikes or allergies. If you don't like goat cheese, or if you don't like olives or something like that, you could write it in. And then if you were allergic to shrimp, you could write it in and make sure that, we were kind of covering all things. And it took the first couple of months to get really good at it and to kind of create a rhythm. But afterwards, it just kind of became this new animal. We had to figure out new ways to cost things. We had to figure out new ways to order things and new schematics, because it just didn't work like a normal restaurant. But I kind of relied on experience at that point, running a bunch of different kinds of kitchens. And we came up with some really great processes that made it run really efficiently. And the best part about it was for 9 years straight, I pretty much always had an amazing staff. So there was very low turnover there. I had, at any given time, the most employees I would have at one point would be around 14 between kitchen and service staff. And the 3 of the people who started on day 1 were there in the end. And the average time in job was around 5 years. I got one guy who worked there for 9 years who still works a couple days a week at the ramen shop for me. That made it a way better experience to have lots of people who just show up to work every day and know their role and know their space, and who, after a year and a half, when you open a restaurant, you're really hoping you're hitting your stride, because that's when, if you don't have a lot of turnover and things are going well and you're busy, you generally have the stuff in place to start taking a little more time, especially when you're chef owner, kind of wear both hats. And that's basically what happened. It gets easier at that point. You don't travel for the first couple of years. You don't take vacations for the first couple of years. But about a year and a half into it, things really got smooth. And by about year 4 through year 9, it was never very difficult. It's never easy, but I had some great people in place the whole time. So.
And systems, right? That's what Luke and I always talk about. Luke's huge on systems. I'm organized. I'm completely disorganized. Like, I have shit everywhere, but I think I'm organized. I have notebooks here. Luke is very organized, and we off of his guidance, we create systems that really streamlines what we do. That could be very time consuming. If you can shave off seconds or minutes here and there, that adds up. Yeah.
Totally. And I'm like you, I'm organized, disorganized.
Yeah.
Right. I have piles. I know what's in them. You would be screwed.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so what was it an experience like for somebody going to Posh? So you come in, what is an experience like? What was the experience like for a diner?
90% of people really liked it. It was one of those things that, if you were super open-minded, really into food, and like to see new things or unique things, you like to try new wines, you like to try new cocktails, you like to kind of, if you're very open-minded or adventuresome, you were definitely higher up on the list of people who were more likely to have a really great time. If you were someone who's a little more of a control freak or a little more selective with what you like to eat, it might be a little lower on your list.
Okay.
If we did our jobs right and the waiters communicated right, then people could really, we could turn people who were that less likely to be happy type of customer. And people eventually found it to be fun. We had a lot of people who would come in, 2 or 3 times a year, which at that price point is a lot. Because they wanted to see like what was new and interesting and what we were working with and try such a unique variety. If 2 people came in and both ordered 7 courses and you both really didn't mark anything off, you were open-minded, then you're going to see 14 dishes. Each of you is going to get a different dish,
Nice.
In some days, we could do that for tables of 3 or 4. If 4 people sat down, were totally open-minded, we might be able to put out 28 different dishes over the course of the night. So
that's cool.
It was kind of cool.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work, but everyone in the kitchen was really into it. And the servers were really into it. When you're going back as a server, if someone does 7 courses with wine pairings, you're going to the table 3 times per course. You are bringing new silverware. You're clearing a plate. Let's start with a scratch. Like you're clearing a plate. You're bringing new silverware. You're bringing new wine, and then you're bringing the dish, and then you do it all over again. So every time is 3 trips to the table, and it's a lot of work. But there were people who were just really passionate about that work, which was a good thing.
About executing that job of yeah. So
well, that concept kind of sounds like a nightmare to manage for as long as you did, with as many moving parts and as many different dishes as you could create. I know you mentioned the kind of like sushi checkoff list, but what are some of the other things you did to make that happen?
Well, the food costing and purchasing thing operates differently than other restaurants too. That was probably those were the 2 things that required completely different systems. And so from a food cost perspective, when you go out to a regular restaurant and you order a steak with spinach, mashed potatoes, and sauce, they're looking at how much every one of those components cost, and they're charging you $42 for the steak, knowing that their cost is, $19, and they're saying that's at 33%, and that's what they want it to be and perfect. And so you manage that cost to be, you want your food cost to be 33% or 30%. Maybe you make a higher margin on the salad, a lower margin on the steak, right? We couldn't do that with Posh. And so what we did was we set a weekly budget, and we would project the food sales. And then whoever was running the kitchen at the time, your goal was to get within, we had about a 21% food cost that we were looking for, because while we could make it up on the food side, our labor was higher. And so the 10 points higher that labor was, we to keep our margins the way they were supposed to be, we had to find 10% somewhere else, and we could do it on the food side because of our portion sizes. And because of the unique way we were reusing ingredients and using scraps and using waste and kind of coming up with new menu items based on stuff that we had. And so if you were the person doing the purchasing, whoever my chef de cuisine was at the time, if I said to you, we're going to do $15,000 in sales this week, well, that means you can spend $3,000. So if you want to spend $1,000 on Kobe beef, you can do it. You just have $2,000 to spend on everything else for the whole week. And so that kind of became the system. And it worked. It was very easy to track. It was very easy to project. And it was very easy to stay within the lines. And if we actually got too low, if somebody did a really good job of being efficient and their food costs, instead of being 21%, might have dropped down to 17%, I would say spend more money and buy a few nicer things, buy some porcini mushrooms or, buy an ounce or 2 of truffles and let's play. Because that's part of I'm not trying to make that extra 5% in lieu of having customers not have a great experience. And so we were happy to keep the food cost at 21%. I didn't need it to jump below that. And that was that. You got scolded for not spending enough money once in a while. So
that sounds like the ideal environment for a chef to be in, at least a certain type of person that loves to be creative and experiment and whatnot. That sounds like a dream job.
Yeah, it was a dream job. And it's funny because there are times where you're not always feeling that creative. But a couple years in, I had so many other great employees who'd been there that everybody could contribute. If you were a new person in the kitchen, it probably took you 6 months to a year before I would let you start throwing menu items at me. And everybody had to test them through me before. But between 3 and 4:30 every day, people would put up new items for me to check out. They would rotate into the list. So it was by the time, you spent a year or two at Posh in the kitchen, you were probably contributing a fair amount to the menu on a pretty regular basis, which is not very common for a lot of people at that age and that experience level. And that's what kind of a lot of them were disappointed when it finally closed. They're like, I just have to go back doing someone else's food. It's like, no, you got some good experience. So when you're ready to run your own place, you'll be ready.
Yeah. So how does oh man, I just lost my thought. I've been losing thoughts lately. I don't know why. So with Posh, really when people would come in, they wouldn't order anything specifically, right? It was that, like you said, that sushi list, and was it just flavors, ingredients, and stuff that they just marked off, and that included drinks and everything?
Most people did the wine pairings. Every course had a wine pairing option, and I would say it was probably in the mid 80 percentile of people who would just do wine pairings. And I was kind of surprised by that in the beginning because wine pairings aren't the cheapest option in the world. As a result of it, we poured some pretty decent wine, which was nice. But somebody a couple years in, I was discussing it with a client. I was like, oh yeah, I'm constantly amazed how many people do wine pairings. And this guy's wife just peeped up. She's like, well, I don't know what I'm getting, so I might as well let you choose the wines. And I was like, that makes sense. Like you really don't know what you're getting if you're flying blind. Most people were like, yeah.
Yeah.
If I'm going to trust you on food, I might as well trust you on wine.
Yeah.
So
that's great. Yeah. Well, I remember the question I was going to ask you. So with running Posh in a completely different way than any other restaurant, you've got to have just a massive amount of intellectual property that could be very valuable, right? You discovered things through experimentation that are super valuable. I mean, so how do you? Well, I know you have Chef's Lounge, right? What is Chef's Lounge?
That's just kind of what I call my little farmer's market stand. I tried to evolve Posh to like an event only type of space.
Okay.
Afterwards, but 6-7 months in the building that it was in, people from the HOA were starting to bitch that there was this place that was just kind of sat empty most of the time.
Gotcha.
And I was still paying my rent, still doing what I needed to do, but the landlord kind of made a big deal about like, look, we need to do something about this, and so we just kind of. I walked away from it. We kind of came to a conclusion of how I would end my lease. And now Chef Lounge is what I call my, until the coronavirus, my little farmer's market stand that I do in Old Town Scottsdale. So,
oh, nice. Okay.
It's kind of, I've never actually like copyrighted the name. I've never actually done anything because it's just kind of what I formally refer to like the still formal side of being a personal chef and doing private events and doing pop-up dinners and the farmer's market. It's just kind of this little bundle. At some point I'm going to have to take it seriously, but it's kind of a de facto nickname for something. I tried to make a real deal of something, but when that went away, I just kind of never really wound anything down or made a big deal about it. So.
Gotcha. Well, if you're like me, man, you probably got ideas like overflowing, right? And yeah,
I'm definitely entrepreneurial.
Well, so all right, so that's a good transition then into. So, when did you open the noodle shop?
The noodle shop was about 9 months before I closed Posh. It was October of 16.
Hot noodles, cold sake.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Hot noodles, cold sake.
Nice. That's in Luke's neighborhood too. Luke is a fan for sure. I am as well, man. Yeah. I
appreciate it.
So how did that happen?
It was after my time of living in Japan. I became infatuated with ramen, and when I moved back, there was none here. And Posh had been open for probably about 1.5 years, and it was right when social media, Twitter and Facebook were starting to take hold. And the economy wasn't very good. And a lot of, we were seeing the same restaurant owners were hanging out and drinking at the same bars and chatting. And we all kind of came up with this random idea because there was no place to eat late at night. The options were very, very few and far between. And we were talking about why that was, and it was an obvious reason. It's difficult to have the expense of being open until midnight or 1 o'clock every night, staffing the place every night, wondering if people are going to come in. Yeah. And so there were people like James Porter and Pavle were involved, and Elliot from Noka at the time got involved, and all of a sudden it turned into this thing of like, well, I'll do it once a week if you'll do it once a week, and if you'll do it once a week, and like you always take Wednesdays, you always take Thursdays, you always take Fridays, and so we use social media to advertise it, and the rule was like you should have 1 to 2 dishes that are like $10 to $15 a piece and some drink specials. And so it kind of turned into this thing. I remember I, started messing around with ramen, and I would do ramen like once or twice a month for those particular nights. And I think we were Wednesday night, if I'm not mistaken. And so whenever I did ramen, it was really busy. And then after about a year, it wasn't just restaurant people. The expats started to hear about this place that was doing ramen. And so I was starting to get people who had lived in Japan. And so it just kind of snowballed into its own thing. And it got to be so busy on the nights that I did ramen that we started looking at doing it at one day a week during regular hours. And so we just made that Tuesday. And probably about 4 years into Posh, 4.5 years into Posh, Tuesday night became ramen night. And within 6 months, we would sell out at about 110 to 120 bowls of ramen, which is 2.5 turns of that restaurant. And it was packed, had a good vibe. Everybody really enjoyed it. And people look forward to it. And so a couple years in, I said, I'm a fool if I don't try to figure out a way to actually do a ramen shop. And then it took 2 years to find a location that was. It's been an interesting ride. And it's very sparse, very small, very friendly, very clean, not a lot of decor. You're seeing the logo behind me. And I get a lot of the regulars from Posh, and a lot of people that I've just known for a long time. And so that's it's been cool. It's so unique in its simplicity, yet so complex in its structure that it's very mentally fulfilling to do as a dish, And the first three, the first three we ever invented, which are the top three on the menu, the Goma, the shoyu, and the miso, I would hold those authentically to any ramen there is, any ramen shop in Japan, they're dead ringers. The other ones are, kind of interpretations to make people more accommodating. Like, you don't see a lot of seafood ramen in Japan, but I have one. And so it's kind of just twisting what I would think that would be if I tried to make it authentically Japanese. A lot of ginger, a lot of richness. The chicken ramen is meant to be very soulful, very simple chicken flavor. Again, using some really cool Japanese flavors and to kind of keep it elevated. The beef ramen, I don't know that I've ever seen beef ramen in Japan, but we've got a beef ramen that kind of goes with the same idea. If there were going to be an authentic beef ramen, I think this is kind of how it would taste. So
nice.
And then you got the shishito peppers and the gyoza as well. Everything on the menu is amazing. But the shishito peppers, I could eat that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day. Those things are amazing.
Right? Next time you come in, do some shishito peppers, and I'll have you if you want them for breakfast, we'll crack an egg on top, and you can eat them that way.
Oh man, that's perfect.
I eat them that way once in a while. So
you just made Luke's day.
Yeah, seriously.
So before we wrap this up, Josh, there's another we didn't realize until recently. So one of our recent episodes was Flip from Freak Street.
Oh right, yeah.
Yeah, and digging into, just kind of getting some talking points and doing a little research on Flip. We didn't realize that you were involved with Freak Street.
I am involved with Freak Street, yeah. I let Flip take all the credit for that because he did all the work for it. And so that just came about in a really interesting way. As I mentioned, I'm kind of entrepreneurial, and I'm always looking for different opportunities. And back in the day, at one point, I was an investor in Crudo as well. And so if there's something that I feel really confident in and I have the ability to put my money into it, I think that's the best way to complement and develop things. As a chef, they were the best French fries I've ever had, and I was fascinated by them. And I had them at a couple of culinary festivals, and I had them at the Truck before. But when I closed Posh, I was kind of offering the space for people to work out of. He was looking for a space. A couple of friends put us together, and he came by, and we chatted, and it was one of those things where I kind of just got into it a little bit and was like, hey, asked some questions and said, what's your game plan? What are you doing? How are you growing? What do you need to grow a little more? And he was still doing the Truck, and he was telling me about the wholesale, that was kind of becoming a new thing. And I said, well, yeah, it's a great product, so I don't see why chefs wouldn't want to carry it. And he was talking about what he needed to do it. And I just looked at him and I said, hey, consider this. If you need to kind of pivot in that direction and you need some money and you'd be interested in taking on a partner, let me know. There might be something there. And so we talked several times over the course of about 8 weeks, and then just kind of put together a little deal that both of us were pretty happy with. I threw some money in. We kind of changed the structure of the company a little bit. And then, he's a great salesperson. He makes a great product. And, he looked at me straightforward, and he's like, I'd love access to your Rolodex, every chef in town. And that was where I was basically like, I can figure out a way maybe where this could be mutually beneficial for both of us. So,
yeah. Yeah.
On,
Well,
on that.
look at them now. They're doing.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I mean, I can't imagine without the Corona if like we would be at 40,000 pounds a week.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know. The way I'm kind of looking at things right now, because we work with a lot of breweries and a lot of the breweries you can't go in, right? Because they don't have food. They don't serve food. So all they have are their to-go options. And they're, some of them are doing delivery. And my hope is like, okay, everybody makes it through. Most of us make it through this, we're still in business. But now on top of what normally we would do as far as, like sales, like summer sales in Arizona or, winter, the peak season, right? But now on top of it, now you understand how to properly deliver your beer, how to package your beer for people to pick up. Hopefully it's bringing that opportunity to allow people, right? So like Flip with his home delivery type of stuff, I mean, I don't know if he's delivering every bag, but he delivered my bag. And it was awesome to see him at the door. Yeah,
keep delivering a lot of them. Yeah, so
yeah.
Hardworking cat.
But that wasn't part of the original plan, right? But it was to get into the restaurants.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Retail was never part of the process because French fries are hard to make at your house. You have to get oil hot. It's dangerous. Most people don't have a deep fryer, and if you can't just throw them in the oven and bake them, they'll be limp and soggy. So
yeah.
But he's done a good job educating people and making sure people have the opportunity to give them a go at home. And the potato chips have been fabulous too. So the potato chip side has been growing pretty rapidly. So,
yeah,
it's a nice thing.
Absolutely, man. That's good. That's a good company to be involved with, Josh, for sure.
I'm excited.
And like you said, Flip he's the salesman. He's just a fun dude to be around. The energy that he brings is like, holy shit! Like how you do that, Flip?
We've become really good friends too, which has been really nice. So
yeah. So, Josh, last question.
Yeah.
The concept of Posh, you loved it. People loved it. Will you bring back something like that? Some experience-based, kind of the adventurous food type of thing?
Someone was making a bunch of noise. Can you redo that question?
Oh, yeah. No worries. Posh, you loved Posh. People loved Posh. Do you have a plan to do another adventurous food endeavor down the road?
No.
No.
You know what? That part of my ego has been stated.
Okay.
I'm never say never, but I highly doubt, the amount of energy and everything that goes into that type of a project would be slim. I don't know that I'm not going to say I'm never going to do another restaurant again, but at the time it's not really a priority. The net profit for the amount of work that goes into restaurants now is just, that equation's pretty terrible. And I think as you get older, you start to learn, more efficient ways to do things. To be honest with you, like until coronavirus hit, and the last year and a half since I had closed Posh, I had grown the private chef side of the business incredibly well. And that's, way more profitable and way more enjoyable and a lot less work. And so honestly, the best thing that I do, my favorite thing that I do is the Saturdays at the Scottsdale Farmers Market, selling my foie gras and chicken liver mousse and pate and all that stuff. If I can figure out a way to kind of evolve that into a larger scale business, like Maison Varot, if you follow like really cool charcuterie from France on Instagram, Maison Varot is like this really neat little charcuterie shop that's available everywhere, but it's super boutique-y products. And if, at some point, if I get the time to kind of explore the ability to do that, that would be great. But typical of me picking fine dining, picking ramen, picking things that not everybody loves. I do need to do something that's, a lot more commercially available to most people.
Yeah.
Fried chicken or burgers or somewhere along the line. Things that 95% of the people want to eat, not 5% of the people.
Yeah,
sure. You should make money doing that.
Yeah. Well, food is your future, right? I mean, do you ever have doubts of food being the direction, or is that in your rear view at this point?
Food's the direction, without a doubt. And
awesome.
Change, and I didn't want to be an owner anymore, I might be a full-time fine dining waiter, because to me that's a great job. Who's going to complain with working at a super fancy restaurant, working from 4 until 10 every night, making $350 a shift, and having the whole day off until the evening? So
I might make a change too after that sales pitch.
Right? Exactly. But I mean, really, the keeping the farmers market's the number one priority. I love the shit out of that job. I like
Why?
the people. It's fun. Everyone who goes to the farmers market cares about food. It's so cool. You know, people are going out of their way to buy unique ingredients, local ingredients, and it's great. I mean, sometimes I sell 2.5, 3 pounds of foie gras a week at $15 an ounce. You know, but just because people care and like the product. So,
and they would come to seek that probably from you of like, oh shit, he was there last week. Is he gonna be here this week? Yeah. That's awesome, man. Well, Josh, thanks so much for joining us, man. I know you're a busy guy. We appreciate you taking the time out. And yeah, man, is there anything we missed? Anything else you wanna talk about, or anything else that you wanna tell us about?
I don't know. I just encourage everybody to go out, especially now. Support local. It's harder than ever. You know what? Everybody wants to go eat and sit down at a restaurant. I haven't done it for months, but I really want to. You know, but don't. It's not the time. Imagine how you feel as an employee of a place like that. Takeout is fine for now, you know. Support as much takeout as you can and let people be healthy, you know. Do your best. It's not the time to force the option. Don't treat employees poorly because their boss decided, you know, to be takeout only. You know, it's not their fault. Don't choose somebody out over the phone. Nobody goes out to eat more than me, but I haven't done it in months. And it's because we just need to wait this out. It's not worth losing your life over, you know. It's just dinner. And in the meantime, do your best to keep your dollars where you can keep your dollars. Everyone's hurting. The summer is worse than it's ever been. You know, adding the fever pitch of the pandemic to the middle of the hottest month of the year and the worst month of the year. Everyone needs support more than ever. And just, I appeal to everyone out there to do as much as you can to stay away from the Walmarts and the Targets. And, you know, they can run their business and that's fine, but they also have access to billions of dollars in cash from parent companies and everything else. The rest of us don't. And so go out of your way to find your favorite small coffee shop, your favorite neighborhood brewery, and pick a new place every week. It's great to have loyal customers, but I want a lot of my friends to be in business too. And so do your best to share the wealth right now because everyone needs a little teeny bit, you know. I'm not one to beg, but at the end of the day, like we could wake up 9 months from now and have 20% of the restaurants that we used to have. It's a very real possibility. So I'm kind of a statistical nerd. I spend a great deal of time on the board of the Restaurant Association. So I stay really close to what's going on in industry. And it scares me right now to think about how the industry could be decimated. If I weren't my own boss right now, I don't know where my next job would be. And this industry has employed people in every recession, losing their jobs for years. We're not there for them anymore. And if you want this to be an option, people have to use their dollars to help support. And they have to vote for people who are going to make great decisions for their local community. Obviously, we have a presidential election, but my whole thing with everybody else is focused on your city council. Do that election. City council election turnout's like 7%. Really, like get in there. And those are the people who make a bigger deal. So the president picks Supreme Court justices and make rules on stuff like abortion. Sure, but worry about the people who are incentivizing businesses, dealing with property tax, dealing with sales tax, dealing with stuff in your neighborhood. That affects you more on a daily basis than, you know, the senator you vote for, the president you vote for, and the, you know, whoever else you vote for, your district council, you know, your district representative. Like we think about that because it's national and we see how everyone else does, but your city council election is way more important.
That was great.
Now I need to go make a sign that says Josh for city council.
Eventually, guys. Eventually, all right.
Is that what the lettering behind you means? Is that your
Josh for city council? In Japanese, I think it says vote for Pedro.
Even better.
I want you, just for my own sake, I want you to move slightly to the right, because if you do it back over a little bit, right there, it looks like you have a red afro. Hold on, let me take you see that? I'm going to take a picture of that.
I almost look like the Ayatollah.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, Josh,
or like the biblical pictures with the sun star thing behind you.
Oh yeah. That's beautiful, Luke. You need to screenshot that one. Well, Josh, thanks again, man. We really appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys. It's awesome. Let me know if we can do anything in the future, and keep it up. We appreciate it.
Definitely.
Will do, man. Thanks again.
Thanks, man.
Later.
Well guys, there you have it. Josh Hebert of Hot Noodles and Cold Sake. Their ramen is absolutely a must-have. You gotta visit sometime. Make sure to like the video below, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on social media as well. Make sure you also follow Hot Noodles and Cold Sake. See you next time.